into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and
Okay.
she is supreme.
3, 2, 1.
Madam Speaker, imagine you've just walked out of this chamber, and outside is a gorgeous sunset. You have a Polaroid camera, and you snap a beautiful picture, and the gray photo prints out the front. You hold it and shake it, waiting for the picture to appear. But suddenly, someone walks by and snatches your photo.
What the hell?
You're stunned. You cry, "Why did you destroy my picture?"
Did you take
The
my
person replies, "Oh, it wasn't a
Polaroid.
picture. It wasn't fully developed yet."
Metaphor.
The face this guy is making while he says this shit.
That photo was transforming into a beautiful image.
shaking a baby with his wrist, trying to get that thing developed?
Is done to the most precious image of all.
Yeah, no
You
matter
got-
what Outcast says, you should not shake your baby like a Polaroid picture.
Beneath the
I'm surprised this guy knows what a Polaroid is. He looks like he's 23.
Death before they breathed life.
Yeah.
Eternal soul.
He's just
woven
hot and
earth
you're
vessels,
jealous.
Sanctified by Almighty God and
That
endowed.
was a based Madison
Miracle of life
Cawthorn.
are denied their birth by a nation that was born in freedom. God's breath of life blown away by the breath of man.
This is the part everyone's
This
mad
cruel
about.
and fallen world may seem too filthy for their very presence. But these precious temples are crafted in the image of God himself. One day, perhaps when science darkens the soul of the left, our nation will repent. But until then, the carnage of this unconscionable deed will stain the fabric of our nation. I hope that the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. I hope that we stop the genocide of abortion in this country. With that, I yield back.
When science darkens the soul of the left.
They're after
Wow.
our vessels, our beautiful vessels.
Wait, I don't understand. When our soul is darkened, isn't our soul already darkened?
I think in his mind, like we once science darkens our souls enough, we die and become like hollow, like in Dark Souls.
Yeah,
But
it's a
what's
Dark
weird is
Souls.
you can still fight when you're hollow. So this man has not played enough Dark Souls.
Well, but I think the idea is, see, Anders, you're confused because you're thinking of Catholicism, where your soul is born darkened and must be redeemed, right? But he's Protestant. So is there original sin for Protestants? Do they have that?
I think it depends on the sect.
I know that they're mostly like a real estate scheme at this point, but
You're thinking of Mormons.
no, I said what I said. They abandoned the Pope, and I'll slander them on my podcast.
Protestant is like predeterminist, and your God's already hates you and shit, but you have free will because there's no free will, and make your own church up with your friends in the woods, and then America happens, and you have way too much cultural influence, and you're scaring everyone.
You're putting
Like
Apparently Martin Luther did believe in original sin, so
okay.
he was the homie to me growing up. I always liked
Martin Luther
him.
was the homie to you?
Yes, because I mean he's an original debate guy. Like he just destroyed some Catholic nerd.
He's the
And-
first poster.
Yeah,
He
literally
posted.
right. And he was into weird diet of worms.
Well,
But-
the thing that people don't like about this is that aside from the fact that he's like wishing damnation on the satanic tint of the left, he's also calling women like his big beautiful temples, and women are like, "I am not your temple, you
Get
shorty.
out of me.
Get out of me!
What are men in
Do
this
not
situation?
post on my door." What are men? Men be at
Another
the
type
temple.
of building. Men are business skyscrapers and women are temples.
Makes sense.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, a penis is like a skyscraper because of the shape.
I want
That's
to be
true.
You know, your penis is like way longer than it is wide by like thousands of feet.
Speak for yourself.
it goes all the way up your torso and then up into your throat almost. A lot of people don't know this about the human body. So your dick is actually like fucking 8 feet long or whatever.
This is the one trick they don't want you to know.
Yeah.
You know what I always like?
Tragic. When a guy has a short dick, it just means he's got an 8-foot dick, but then only a little bit of it comes out of the body. And what a cruel trick from a god that, frankly, I don't think exists.
Right, you can't put too many buildings in a short dick. I mean, too many businesses, rather.
Huh.
Because
Fair.
they don't have enough floors, is what I'm saying.
Right.
What were you saying, Anders?
What were you saying?
Oh, Martin Luther, you know what? Because I was baptized Lutheran, so I've always thought about bringing this back, maybe profiting off of it, which is probably not something
Very
you would like,
Protestant of you. Very Protestant to say that.
yeah, he was very into self-flagellation, just whacking yourself on the head. And that's what I was into as a little boy. And I've thought about making it into a yoga style business, like convincing yuppies that this is actually really good for you. Like it's yoga is genuinely very good, but this would be like a ripoff of yoga, just to trick like rich Caucasians.
So is yoga where you whip yourself?
Yeah.
No, you get yuppies to buy old-timey floggers, and you tell them, oh, back in medieval times when the monks would do this, they didn't know it, but they were actually opening the chakras.
Exactly.
It's like going paleo.
Yeah.
Going paleo or staring at the sun, which is apparently what the Island Boys actually do.
Really?
Yeah. Because they say that in this, people I'm sure are familiar with the Island Boys by now. The Island Boys,
Right?
But they have
It's
that
not
line
our
like
job
staring
to
at the sun.
educate you about the Island Boys.
Read a book, for crying out loud.
But I saw an interview with them where they're like, "Yeah, we really like actually stare at the sun, and it opens up our third eye."
All joking aside, this is how we spend our time.
Blind. So funny. They look like to me they look like Sideshow Bob, and when they had his brother on, who
Sideshow Mel.
No, his brother, Sideshow. Fuck, what's his name? Because they had Niles on, because he's Frasier.
Right. Yes.
And he has exactly their haircut. I can't get it out of my head when I see them. It's just they look like they fight each other with their little limp wrists, like Mr. Burns.
Yeah, it's just Sideshow Bob with like shorter, different colored hair, right? And he's not a clown.
Yeah, he has like business hair,
Yeah.
But it's as crazy as Sideshow Bob's, just as it orderly.
Sometimes I'll be watching the news and feel like I'm watching Sideshow Madison Cawthorn with his crazy ideas. Good grief.
Well, let's go back. Let's start with his initial metaphor, which, by the way, do they always speak this figuratively when they're making cases for shit? Seems crazy that there's this much like, let's just make a case for your political point, right? But they're always like writing like an 8th grade essay when they're trying to convince you to ban abortion. He starts with this metaphor. You're standing around, you're holding one of those Polaroid cameras we all know and love in the year 2021, the kind where you take a picture and then it goes like bzzz, and then a picture comes out, and well, either that or I guess he's
disposable.
Someone, yeah. Well, maybe it's not a Polaroid. Maybe it's a regular camera. You take a picture, someone comes up and then rips your camera out. So in the metaphor, your disposable camera, before you take it to Walgreens to get it developed, a thing we all do all the time.
Right.
This
is a man who's choosing tradition, but his tradition is like 1992.
Yeah, embrace tradition.
He's returned to when cameras were less good.
Your camera is pregnant after you've taken all the pictures, but before you take it to the camera hospital, which is the corner of a Walgreens or a Eckerd's or whatever the fuck exists in your neck of the woods, and then when they bring it back and they've printed out the photos, those are your babies, according to this man.
It's
right?
pregnant with memories. Now tell me God didn't have a plan.
And abortion is someone intercepting and like exposing your film, and then I guess if you get that developed, it's like a stillborn or something. I don't know.
These are all things you can think about when you're forced to have your baby by the state.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. It's such a dark time.
I guess actually for him, taking a photo is fucking.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
cool.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so there, and
Is that why
some
it's over so
conservatives
fast?
some conservatives have actually said this, that every sperm globule, which contains millions of potential lives, there should be funerals for each and every one of them.
Folks, welcome back to the show. It's another week with your 3 successful sperms on the mic.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Made it to the egg.
Best of the best, baby. Count the rings. Count my disgusting rings.
Number 1 sperm. Hi, I'm Jake Flores. That's Anders Lee.
Anders Lee here.
That's Alex Patak.
What up?
It's Pod Damn America. It's the show.
We got a barn burner for you this week, folks. You're gonna love it.
Yeah. If you have currently a disposable camera, congratulations on your bounty. And if you choose to destroy those photos before you get them developed because maybe you don't like them or they would ruin your life, I support your right to not have to. Why would this is a weird metaphor, the camera thing? Because what if you don't want the photo?
It doesn't. It's really just the shaking part. I think that worked.
Yeah.
And did it work? I don't know. I have problems with it. But
that's how you develop a fucking baby is you shake it. I mean, a photo.
Oh. We have an impressionable parents listening, and they should be.
You know how there are like
warned to not shake the baby.
There are fertile poses that you can do after you've copulated to ensure that the sperm gets to the egg or whatever. You can curl up in a ball or whatever, like in Midsummer.
Yeah.
What if the way to ensure that you're gonna have a baby is you got to shake the woman around? Just get it, mix it all up in there. Just grab her by the shoulders, be like, "Come on, bring me an air."
Yeah,
that's something I think about. Oh boy,
she's like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
I'll never conceive your child.
Yeah, and then the baby comes out of her like. Bzz.
This is actually an interesting discussion. There may never be a better time to have a baby, as an asteroid may slam into the Earth next week, destroying all life on the planet.
What is the actual odds on that? I'd like to get action.
I'm going to get the article up. So wait, you would bet for the asteroid?
Well, I want to know what the odds are.
Okay, hold on.
I mean, it would make sense to bet all my money against, because if it doesn't happen, I can cash it in. And if it does happen, then too bad. Like, it's not going to matter anyway.
I want my baby to be a Daguerreau type or a silver tin baby. So it looks like a creepy Tom Waits photo.
What's a Silverton baby?
Like a tin. Like, there's some silver tin photography. Tin type. The really cool grainy kind that's made in like a tin thing.
Like sepia tone?
No.
Okay.
Look it up. It's fucking cool. There's all these like proto forms of photography before they kind of land on like the one we know and love that is also now obsolete because of digital babies or whatever. But it starts off with like Man Ray and like rayographs and shit.
So this is just old school, like 19th century cameras?
It would be like if everyone did tin type photography for just every photo, it'd be massively wasteful. It's like a antiquated thing, but it looks fucking cool.
Worth it.
Yeah. You can do it as like a novelty now.
Okay, so this is what people.com says. A football field sized asteroid will soon pass by Earth. Here's what you need to know. And first of all, I'm hearing football field-sized asteroid. I'm thinking touchdown.
Is it football field shaped?
They give me the impression it's long, but I don't know how well you can actually like see these things in the darkness of space. An asteroid as wide as the Eiffel Tower is tall, weird way to say that, called 4660 Nereus, or 1982 dB, is expected to skim past Earth on December 11th. NASA considers the 330-meter asteroid to be potentially hazardous, in quotes, due to its size and proximity to our planet.
Oh boy.
Which I'm hearing about this, and I'm like, how did we make a branch of the Army that only does space stuff, and they are not in charge of doing the movie Armageddon to this asteroid?
Right. That's what I was going to say, is you should shoot up some of the best football players onto the asteroid, because maybe like the size is such that if a full game of football is completed on it, then it'll tip away, and you need the best football. That would be an awesome. And the ball is an asteroid.
Use its shape against it. You're saying,
yeah.
In the movie, Morgan Freeman is going like, "By God, it's working. It's going away.
It's a turnover on downs."
Mr. President, get me the phone. I don't know why he's asking the president to get him the phone. That seems fucked up.
There's asteroid shit happening, just like I knew there would be.
Call the president of China. We've got to get them to do this to all the asteroids, because there's different asteroids coming at every country.
I really don't remember like what happens in that movie. Do they get hit by it?
Yeah. In Deep Impact or Armageddon?
Oh, I know they get hit by it in Deep Impact. It's kind of a giveaway.
Deep Impact, I believe they do get hit by it, and Armageddon, they narrowly evade it.
Nice.
By exploding it.
Oh, I guess I didn't get the distance. It's like it's supposed to be this is ranked among the top 3% of the most accessible near-Earth asteroids. So
accessible?
Yeah, like you could.
Ladies and gentlemen of Congress, imagine you've summoned a humble asteroid using the black materia from Final Fantasy VII, and someone comes along and hires coal miners or whatever to fly a spaceship to your asteroid and blow it up before you get to welcome it into your life on your planet. This is why we must overturn Roe versus Wade. Every asteroid is a miracle. Please.
That's true. It's God's path. Who
I
are we?
am the one-winged angel. He's just screaming at Congress. Shirt rips off. He pulls out the massive goon. And he cuts.
Who are we to say that the path that God has trotted out, that we should be able to disrupt it? You know? We should
exactly.
just...
Well, I think it's going to be a few million miles away from the Earth.
I think that we're doing Protestantism now. We have to let the asteroid kill us.
I will never do that. God has a vessel on Earth, and he wears a tall hat.
Oh yeah,
now
the Pope is a vessel, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a vessel of great ideas.
There's a
now
baby.
Imagining, you know that Bernie Sanders, one of his favorite movies is Melancholia. Apparently,
that's insane.
I know. So what if he's going to have to get to the Senate floor and like describe what happened? Kirsten Dunst is a bride, and but it's actually a metaphor for depression, and the Earth hits Earth, and this is what we got to do.
And he's talking about abortion. It's a metaphor for abortion,
right? But he's using. See, I think the asteroid can be. I mean, honestly, yeah, that could be. If we want to stop the asteroid, that is interfering with God's plan, and so is abortion, and we should be allowed to do that.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Use our dark science.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what we're all
the
trying
dark
to do.
cyborgs of the left, imbued with science and lacking in souls. The only people who can stop what the fuck was that guy's name? Jesus Christ, how many of these young Hitler assholes are they going to crop up?
There's just like a big position for you to fill right now if you're under the age of 40 and willing to just be like, Goebbels had good points. Like, you can get a lot of money out of it.
Yeah, seems like it.
People are just getting that bag.
What the fuck kind of name is Cawthorn?
Southern.
Yeah, it's
Plantation
incredibly
fucking ass
slave owning-y. But what you said earlier about Bernie Sanders really did awaken a very good point, which is who's he trying to get to with this photograph metaphor? Who's that hitting hard for? Bernie Sanders, who's still using disposable cameras. He hasn't
That's
had
right.
a camera.
Yeah.
And I used to,
That's
when I was a
1973.
teenager, young man, anytime I went on a trip, I would get a disposable camera, and it was so much fun and take a bunch of pictures.
Oh, take
But
me back.
that's been robbed from this generation.
You know, the Beatles actually used to all take pictures on their disposable cameras together in one big room in a circle.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. It wasn't gay back then to do that.
No, it was
You
just,
could take those pictures.
You just what young boys did.
That's just what we did in Liverpool, they'd say.
Yeah.
Liverpool. What is the name?
Those
I heard
MFs
this
love Liverpool.
recently. Yes, Liverpuglians is apparently what you call somebody from Liverpool, which is just
Yeah.
insane to me.
Not gonna call them that.
Yeah, it sounds like an insult.
Not interested.
Yeah.
Look
Well-
at this photograph. The Nickelback guy, and he's talking about his unborn baby.
Just showing you his child. He's like, look at this photograph. I developed this with my cum. Well, it's a dark time, but there are some bright spots in this wild world,
That's right.
and we had on a very special guest to talk about them.
Yes. Let's go to the tape.
Who are we talking to today?
Yeah, do you want to
Well, I
like...
intro him in the.
That's true.
Fair enough.
Should I intro him twice? Okay.
Right,
We
so
are speaking
context
with.
from like what we're talking about, I
Yeah.
guess.
Okay,
Yeah,
the bright
that's what I
spots
meant.
in the world, which are
It's
the.
a hard turn from like cum, the Nickelback guy talking about cum to like what
Okay,
we're about
okay.
to talk about. We need some with the foreplay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Rub my
Nickelback.
titty, baby.
What's their big hit? What is it again?
Photograph.
Photograph.
It's Photograph. Okay.
don't
Well,
Is that song in the Spider-Man soundtrack?
Yeah.
that's just Chad Kroger. Hero? You know
You got
that
me
a
there.
hero can save us.
Not all
I'm
of
not gonna
Nickelback.
stand there and wait.
Just Chad Kroger. Wrong.
Right. Well, there's so many different ways to go. Okay, this is how you remind me. This is how you remind me to overthrow the capitalist class is with solidarity, international solidarity.
Huh.
And that's one way that we could do it. We could talk about the origin of the name Nickelback, which was at Starbucks. He asked for a Nickelback, and that's where the name came from. And Starbucks workers are actually trying to unionize right now in Buffalo. And you know who else is in a big union? Indian farmers.
If you tell them at Starbucks your name is Nickelback, they have to say it.
That's right. But, yes, you know what's a much sweeter song than Nickelback is the song of the International Proletariat.
Oh,
And
love
to
it.
sing it, we have a man. I don't. I'm going to do the same intro twice, but let me think of stuff I
a
didn't
legend.
say. A legend, a bright spot, who's going to share with us some things we can do to change the bad times into good times for humanity, for all of humanity, and not just the bourgeoisie. Let's go to the interview with Mr. Vijay Prashad. All right, now we are now joined by Vijay Prashad. How do you give this man an introduction? He is, I think, first and foremost, an internationalist is what I would describe him as, and a writer at large, a globetrotter, and the director of the Tri-Continental Institute. Vijay, thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. And we were chatting before the show, and apparently, this is a hot tip. We're breaking this. I don't know if you've discussed this in media before, but you are a trained mime. What can you tell us about that? How did you get into that? he
Dude.
can't
Can't
talk.
see him, but he's
Right.
shrugging. His face tells a story.
You can't ask somebody trained as a mime to tell you about what they have learned, but you're a clown. So one clown, another is a mime. All I can say is that I, when I was a young person, was pretty angry about lots of things, and to control my anger, I studied meditation for a long time. And then when I came to Los Angeles, I felt that mime was the artistic way of doing meditation. And I met this man called Tom Liebhardt, who is, trained in the great French school of mime. And I found it amazing. It's like dance, except you don't have to be as lithe. I'm not a lithe person. I don't have a body for a dancer. I wish I could dance like a modern dancer. I think it's beautiful. But mime was the closest thing, and I really dig it. And I think what's great about mime is or anything like that, tumbling school, clown school, circus school, any of these things, it just teach you not to take yourself so goddamn seriously. And I like that. I really like that. I never wanted to be a suit. And this kind of attitude came to me from, the jokester tradition. And mime, circus, all of these are in the jokester tradition.
If only there was some way to take all this anger and put it in some form of box. Something mimes do.
You're right.
Mime, I'm doing the box. You can't see me.
Can't see him. It's interesting you mentioned dance, because I came to clowning and comedy really from, I had to take dance in high school and was terrible at it. I can't learn choreography for the life of me, but one of my teachers was like, you trying to dance is actually pretty funny. And so I took that and ran with it. You can be, you got to embrace your inner klutz and moron and all that. But
I had the opposite experience. I was doing mime and they were like, this is so rhythmic. Get out there. Move those hips.
You're creating a sexual awakening in the crowd. We legally can't let you continue.
Well, who else is a clown? Although
I'm
I don't know if I would
dying to
bestow. I don't know if I would bestow the honor of clown on him. I'm curious what figure you think this guy emulates. Narendra Modi. What do you think? He's a clown, a mime? I actually asked my clown instructor. I've told the story before, but my clown instructor if Trump would be a good clown, and he freaked out at me and was like, "He's an awful clown. There's no beauty." Do you think there is any clown in Modi, or is he something else entirely? What is he? A heel? What's his deal?
Well, he is an incredible political force as a person, because he's really quite intelligent how he puts himself forward. He doesn't often say things. He's the opposite of Trump. Trump couldn't stop talking and couldn't stop tweeting and couldn't stop saying stuff. Modi is the opposite. He tries to be the oracle. He tries to be quiet. In fact, during the pandemic, he grew a beard. And there's a way in which, he wanted to stand above the fray of politics, indicate with a finger to his acolytes to do things, but he himself was above it all. It didn't work. To be a clown or to be a mime or to be an artist, you need a sense of the sublime. You have to understand a little bit of the not obvious, And in a sense, Modi tried too hard to be the not obvious. So these people are actually too blunt to be artists. I felt that there was something decidedly unattractive in Donald Trump, in the bluntness of him. It's not attractive. Modi is the same. He tries so hard to be this superior figure, who is overseeing a ghastly government in the last 7 years, a ghastly government in India. But he's attempted to say, I'm just like a saint above it all. And, it doesn't work because he's not good at that. He's not a good actor. And there's something ridiculous about the way he's been performing. And, in this 7-year period, he's only apologized twice for 2 of his policies. That's extraordinary. In a country like India, 1.4 billion people, you'd want the head of government to own up to problems. Not from him.
And was one of those apologies recent because we're speaking today after there's a recent repeal of, I believe, 3 farm laws and 2 labor laws, if I'm not mistaken. Did he, there's a massive movement against these acts. Did he offer an apology, or he was just like unapologetic even as he was undoing them?
Well, the previous apology in 2015, a year into his government, was around an amendment to a Land Acquisition Act. And then the farmers were up in arms as well. And he had to back down from that. This last summer, he pushed 3 farm laws through Parliament with very little discussion. And essentially, the best way to understand it is he wants to turn all Indian farmers into the equivalent of an Uber driver. They want to Uberize agriculture, where you're basically just a semi-independent contractor with either your own field, or you've rented fields from somebody, like you drive your car or you rent a car from somebody, and then you get instructions from an anonymous app. You don't know who the other Uber drivers are, so you can't organize really. And you're at the mercy of the app. What the app tells you, you have to do. And farmers said, no, for God's sake, we are not going to completely surrender our independence. So for a year, tens of thousands of farmers sat outside Delhi and said, we're not going anywhere. This is the largest mass protest that I've seen in my lifetime. 54 years old, haven't seen anything like this. And Modi had to back down from the 3 farm laws. But let me say, he's a character. All he said was, I'm sorry I couldn't persuade you. He didn't say the laws were wrong, my friends. He just said, I'm sorry I couldn't persuade you. And the 2 labor laws, he didn't move on those. Those are not to be withdrawn. Last year, 26th of November, 250 million workers went on strike in India. That's almost the entire population of the United States. 250 million workers. And yet the government will not move on those 2 labor laws because business just wants it. They want to take away people's dignity. You're not entitled in this world to have dignity.
Is he always passive aggressive? Is that his flavor? He's just like a rude guy.
Sometimes he can be really nasty, really nasty. Many years ago, now almost 30 years ago, I was a young reporter in Delhi, and I was at somebody's birthday party, as it turned out. And at the time, a senior leader of Mr. Modi's party took me aside at the birthday party. As these things go, there's journalists and there's politicians of different kinds. And he took me into a corner. And he said the following to me. He said, Vijay, you can write anything you want. We know you're critical of us. You can write anything you want. But if you make fun of us, be careful. It was very chilling. I was a young reporter and I was really quite scared by the way he told me that. He said, you can say anything you want. We're not going to tell you to not report. But if you make fun of us, be careful. So Modi's whole crowd, that whole right-wing strand in India is like that. They just don't tolerate it if you don't give them the adequate respect. And so more and more, people just don't cover them critically. They're scared of them, actually. These are scary fellas. They don't play around. So it's passive-aggressive, yes, in the way in which that sort of I'm above it all demeanor might appear. But they're really aggressive when they need to be aggressive.
I wonder how much of politics comes down to your perspective on clowns, with the Modi faction being so resolutely anti-clown in everything they do, and their denial of the force of life.
And they even, when they were passing these laws, didn't they refuse to let any dissenting voices even speak in the parliament?
I mean, they didn't even have a debate. It's a basic thing in a parliamentary democracy. You put a bill on the table. If you watch that, whatever it is, Schoolhouse Rock, even in the god-awfully undemocratic US Congress, they allow for debate on new bills when they're on the table. I mean, I just can't even imagine Mr. Biden is going to hold a summit on democracy. What does the United States know about democracy? when is the last time anybody has really felt that the Congress has operated democratically, small d democratically? In that sense, Modi's parliament, and it was Modi's parliament because he has a huge majority, they just rammed through these bills. And then later when he apologizes and tells the farmers, I'm sorry I didn't persuade you, it's so disingenuous. What do you mean, I'm sorry I didn't persuade you? You never allowed us to discuss the bills in the first place.
Right. So yeah, it's distressing to have him in power for so long. It was definitely a disappointment when he was reelected, and he'd have this friendship with Trump. But it is, as you mentioned, amazing to see this upsurge in resistance to him. And some leftists look at this from the U.S. and they say, "Oh wow, look at what they're doing. They have a general strike. We could do that here. Let's just boom, snap our fingers, bingo, bango, bongo, we got it." And it's that. We're kind of missing sometimes the fact that this took, a long time of organizing and building this movement. How long have these parties and organizations been building their capacity, and they're building their confidence to pull something like this off?
It's a couple of things. One of them is, before we talk about the parties and the unions and so on, we have to admit a fact, which is that in the states of like Punjab and Haryana, where these farmers' protests, because it's near Delhi, were the most robust this year. In these communities, the idea of community hasn't been destroyed. And there are still community institutions. There is a lot of mutual aid that is just baked into the culture of Punjab and Haryana. Community, the idea of a community kitchen is not alien to that part of the world. If there's a crisis, you go and help your neighbors. In many parts of the West, I want to say it a little bluntly, that a lot of the community ideas has been eroded by individualism, or family concern. What's my family going to be like? Even during the pandemic, we saw very little mutual aid, spontaneous mutual aid in various places. There was reliance on soup kitchens and food kitchens of different kinds. But this kind of thing where when a strike takes place, community members just gather, put up a tent in a public place, start cooking food, and they cook for 1,000 people. There is no need to say, okay, who's going to do what? It's a kind of spontaneous mutual aid. So that's a huge advantage for this kind of struggle. Religious institutions kicked in immediately, particularly the Sikh gurdwaras. They came and set up langars where you could eat and so on. And the trade unions and agricultural unions have been going since the 1920s and 30s. These are some left wing. The most important in these were communist and socialist trade unions. But there were also community trade unions, where a certain area, the farmers gathered together and they created a farmers association. So there were regional associations of farmers, and they've been struggling since 1991. Do you know that since 1991, 400,000 farmers have been documented to have committed suicide? 400,000. 100,000 in the last 7 years. This is government statistics, So farmers have been at it for a very long time. You can't just snap your fingers and do these things. It requires, as the word you used is confidence. It requires community and it requires confidence. You've got to have faith in your neighbors, You can't distrust your neighbors. And what happens in these kind of class struggles is that the class struggle is geographic, because you're living in a farmer's area. You don't have too many absentee landlords. You don't have big corporate people living near you. So the entire community can come together and rise up. And that's what happened in this struggle. You see, the people who own the corporations live very far away. So you don't know who they are. They're abstracted. And that's why the farmers immediately personalized the struggle. And they said, Adani, Ambani, the names of the big business owners, we are going to boycott you, they said. Now, these Adani and Ambani don't live next to them, so the whole community rose up. This is a lesson to take. When I learned about the way capitalism works and so on, we were told one of the most difficult things is to organize against an abstract force. In the old days, you organize against the landlord or against the lord, the feudal lord, or whatever. Now who? Banks, whatever. But what this struggle showed was that people in a community said, look, we are all getting screwed together. We're all going to rise up. Who's the enemy or whatever? It's somewhere over there, and we're going to name them. You could rise up and say it's Elon Musk, or it's Jeff Bezos. Why not Jeff Bezos? Bezos, we're going to come after you, man. You have an ambition to be the world's first trillionaire? No, it's not going to happen. You can be Mars's first trillionaire, but you're not going to be Earth's first trillionaire. And you can take Elon with you. There's a way in which you can personalize it, and that's what the farmers did. They said Modi, Adani, Ambani, and so on.
And the, obviously very tragic about the suicide rates over the past few years, but hasn't that gone down with this movement?
This is interesting. So it's also true that as the farmers started to protest, and the first big protest took place about 6 years ago. So in Maharashtra, there was a long march from Nasik to Bombay. The farmers in the state of Maharashtra, it's an enormous state in Western India, where there had been a lot of suicides, marched across the state essentially. They arrived in Bombay, which is one of the most important cities in the world. It's a big financial capital and so on. They arrived at the outskirts of Bombay. They were told that, listen, tomorrow when you plan to march into Bombay, it was 11 o'clock at night. They were told, when you plan to march into Bombay tomorrow, it's the examinations for the secondary school students. So your marching in is going to disrupt them. So these thousands of farmers quickly gathered, and they took a vote to continue marching through the night. Even though they had marched all day in the blazing sun, they marched through the night, entered Bombay, entered the main area, set up their camp before daybreak. And when the news of this came to the city came out to greet the farmers. People brought bottles of water, food, because they saw the compassion of the workers. They said, we don't want to disrupt the children's school and their exams and so on. So they marched all night. And that kind of story, that event of the long march of the farmers, it made a lot of people feel like, we can fight. And you're right, in Maharashtra, in Vidarbha in particular, there was a decline in the suicide rate. People said, I'm not going to bloody drink fertilizer and die. I'm going to march all night into Bombay and challenge the government. And the government had to meet their demands. That's something, once you start protesting, and you can see this in a place like the United States, where, in so many towns, you've had an epidemic of farm losses. You might remember the 1980s, Willie Nelson and Farm Aid. And I covered a story in Iowa at that time. It was a farm suicide. A man came from a bank where he had been foreclosed, came to his house, shot his whole family and killed himself. But it was not called a farm suicide. I'm sure if you look in Iowa in the 80s, the rates of shootings inside families will be very high, I'm sure. And so, you go from that to the methamphetamine epidemic in many of these farm states in the United States. There's a decline of confidence, nothing we can do. Kids driving around in bikes with bottles of methamphetamine to mix it. They're getting paid to ride around town. So they mix the meth, bring it back to the labs. That's the state of many of the towns in the US. I bet if a protest movement of substance breaks out there, you'd see a decline in the kind of desolation that people feel, or the turn to Trump. The turn to Trump might have actually decreased desolation among people for all the wrong reasons, but nonetheless, it may have decreased their desolation. It would have turned it into anger.
Right. So that actually brings me to a question I wanted to ask you about internationalism and how to actually connect these movements from around the globe, United States, India, Latin America, wherever. And it seems like the sort of traditional, Trotskyist view that a lot of people I've known through the years have subscribed to is that it has to be an international movement. So that means everybody has to be coordinated. You do a strike in Iowa, you also have to connect it to some strike in Germany, and that's how you get the ball rolling. But correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like your perspective on this is a little different, that internationalism is crucial. But in order for it to actually work, the movements have to be built in each of these places first, based on local and national concerns that are before you build those bonds, so the actual solidarity has meaning. Is that fair to say, or would you quibble with that a little bit?
No, I think that's very fair to say, and that's well said. Look, frankly, people need to understand that they can change the world, and you experience that in your own locality. You know, if you're out there, struggling for, like, say, income support for your neighbors, or you're out there struggling for the right of a woman to have, her body in control by herself and so on. If you're out there in the world struggling, a sense of confidence, you have a vision of where you exist in the world. And having built your confidence, your power, your organization, you can link up with people around the world. You know, for instance, there was an enormous demonstration this week in Buenos Aires, led by the people who go through the trash, essentially recyclers who go through the trash and pull the plastic out and so on. They demonstrated on behalf of a law for packaging, where you're going to force companies to use essentially non-plastic packaging and recycled materials and so on. The American Chamber of Commerce in Buenos Aires lobbied against the law because US companies in Argentina don't want this law. And so that's a good instance of internationalism. You know, it would have been interesting if we had, say, Coca-Cola unions in Colombia and in the United States and other countries get involved and say, yeah, we agree with you that Coke should not be paying off legislatures in the Argentinian Congress, but should be taking the words of these workers seriously. But you can only do that one organization to another, and you don't build your organization in the ether. You build your organization where you stand. And that's why it's so important in a country like the United States to have more robust organization. Don't have to be trade unions. They can be in communities. You need robust organization. People feel powerless otherwise. They don't feel like they can do anything. And you just have, I feel like sometimes I keep saying the same things, but you have to do something. You can't have a theory unless you're also testing the theory in the world. So there's lots of young people in the United States getting influenced by Marxism. And I see that online. They write to me and say, oh, we watched all the... And I want to say, okay, that's great. Now build a group where you live. Act where you live, Test your politics. See what your neighbors are struggling with, lift up the concerns of your neighbors, amplify them, make them known. Go and tell the mayor of your town, this is an issue. Mayor says, look, it's out of my hands. I can't do anything. Go see the congressperson. Take 100 people, build it to 500. That's how you build power. And then you can connect to a group in Argentina and a group in, else in India and so on. You can't link up to them as an individual. That's the issue with internationalism. We are all internationalists, but you have to be internationalists from one center of organization or one node of organization to another node of organization.
Right. And I feel like, I believe you came to the United States in the early 80s. Is that correct?
That's it. Yeah.
And now we look back on that as, it's such a dismal time for the left. Got Reagan and all that. But there was, compared to today, a pretty massive internationalist movement in America of fighting apartheid, South Africa. And, we know how awful Reagan was in Latin America. But in many ways, that movement that you were a part of, helped stop him from being way worse, because Nicaragua could have been another Vietnam, and was the concern at that point. What were some of those lessons you take from the 1980s and being able to, as the left was in decline, actually forcing the U.S. government to hold back and do things like force sanctions on the apartheid regime in South Africa?
Well, I came to the United States in the mid-1980s, having experienced a terrible situation, a riot, in which over a weekend 3,000 Sikhs were killed in Delhi. And having been rattled by that, I found it hard to focus. And anyway, I found myself in Los Angeles eventually. And in Los Angeles, I was very quickly drawn into two kinds of struggles. One was the struggle against apartheid South Africa that I brought with me. That concern was already with me in India. I had already been involved, even though India, there was no real target for an anti-apartheid movement. It was more solidarity with the people of South Africa. But when I got to California, I got involved with the concerned people concerned with South Africa and various networks. The other one, which was really an eye-opener for me, I got to tell you, it was incredible, was I got involved with CISPES, which is the Community in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. That was really an eye-opener, because I don't know if you know that, but there are, I think, near or almost more people from El Salvador in Los Angeles than in San Salvador. I think something like more or nearly as many people in the capital of El Salvador as live in Los Angeles. And, the death squads didn't just operate in El Salvador, they operated in Los Angeles. There's a very famous case of a woman who worked for CISPES in the office. I knew her, who was abducted by a death squad in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And it was nuts. There was there's a church, the church in East Los Angeles, where the father there, Father Olivares, opened his church to be a sanctuary for people from El Salvador, particularly some of the people of the left who had come across the border and so on. And that why I'm saying it was an eye-opener is it brought together how intimate the United States actually is with Central America. Central America is not far away from Los Angeles. Los Angeles teams with people from Mexico and Central America because it used to be part of Mexico. And it's not so far away, and people are there in large numbers. The immigration issue is there. The police issue is there. The harsh brutality of Los Angeles was there, but also the war. The war was there, and not just people fleeing from the war. The war machine is all over the place in Southern California. Military contractors, defense intelligence people, the Rand Corporation, all of them are in LA. Los Angeles is a military city. We don't think about it like that. We think of Hollywood. We don't think about war. But, you got Rand, you've got Caltech, you've got, the military contractors, you got military production happening at the edges of LA. And then you have the populations from El Salvador, from Nicaragua, from Honduras, which was treated essentially as a military base. Lots of migrants from Honduras living in miserable conditions. They didn't want to be in LA. They fled from the US bombs or the US bases. And that, to me, friends, that was an enormous lesson because, South Africa, it's not quite a US story. It didn't seem, of course, US corporations and Dick Cheney saying that, Nelson Mandela is a terrorist. All of that is true. The United States played a big role. But in Central America, it wasn't just some corporate thing and assistance in the UN. It was nasty. And to watch the nastiness of the US war machine, it's been a lesson I have never, ever forgotten.
Wow. Well, I want to make sure as well to ask you about your latest book, I believe, Washington Bullets, which slightly embarrassing. When I first saw that this had come out, there was about a 5 to 10 second period where it's like, wow, did Vijay Prashad just write a book about the Washington Bullets basketball team? I thought it was like a political history of the team for a second, but it is not about that. It's a really, I think, important book, especially for young radicals, sort of a primer on U.S. foreign policy and what we've done over the years. And to write it, I believe you actually interviewed a former CIA director. How did you pull that off?
No, it's not one director. You see, firstly, I must say that I'm glad you thought it was a book about basketball. I am going to eventually write a book about the greatest Cuban boxer because as a young man, before miming, I used to be a boxer and I was a pretty good boxer. That's why my nose is broken and so on. I was pretty good. I was a welterweight.
That's not for the miming.
Pardon?
That's not from the miming, the
No,
broken.
that was not for miming. That was from a left hook. I used to box as a southpaw, which means I faced off this way, and I took a really bad shot on the nose and cracked. And it's an incredible feeling to have that happen, because you sort of you go blind with the pain, because it's right in your brain, Anyway, but I'm going to write a book about Teofilo, the great Cuban boxer, some other day. But that book is named after a song by The Clash, who I encountered in Los Angeles. And in fact, their album Sandinista was just, for me, a revelation about music. And I knew punk rock, and I used to be a DJ at KSPC playing the all-night punk show with my friend Greg Owen, who tragically died a couple of years ago. We used to do an all-night punk show. He played West Coast punk rock, and I played basically English punk, like the UK subs and things. We had Jello Biafra come to the studio. We had all kinds of, interesting people. Henry Rollins. That was the day of Yola Tango, of, the Butthole Surfers, of Dead Kennedys. And those were the days of the Roxy and so on. So when I listened to The Clash, I remember listening to the whole double album of Sandinista thinking, this is incredible. And I've always wanted to use the title of that song, Washington Bullets by The Clash, for something. And I said, this is perfect. Over the course of the years, while I've written and, traveled to Iraq and Afghanistan and different places, obviously I've encountered and befriended CIA people. That's in the nature of things. And often, they're very smart people, many of them, particularly the analyst crowd. And several years ago, I had been interested in writing a book about the assassination of a US ambassador in Kabul, in Afghanistan, in 1979. And his name is Adolph Dubs. He's the first US ambassador to be killed on duty. This is before, Stevenson was killed in Libya, much before, in 1979. And I had been going around, I met a MI5 guy, met all kinds of intelligence people, Afghan intelligence, trying to collect material on this. And I got a message from this guy who said, meet me this day at a hotel in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I, dutifully showed up at the hotel at tea time, and he was sitting there in a big overcoat. And he started, chatting with me, asking me, how did you get here? That kind of thing. And I thought, this is incredible, because, I knew who he was. He was the director of operations in essentially all of West Asia in the key years of the 70s and 80s. He was stationed in Tehran before the Iranian Revolution. Eventually, he was station chief in Paris, very senior CIA guy in the field. And he told me, stay away from the Dubs story. He said, this is going to be too much for you. We don't, we've been watching you, he said to me. I said, what the hell? I've often thought this would make a great Oliver Stone movie, the killing of Adolph Dubs and the start of the war on terror. But this man, and others over the years have really been useful, because he's dead now. He died a few years ago, but they've told me many interesting stories, because they've got nothing to hide. Let's be frank.
Really?
Some of this stuff is for them also bragging, He would tell me things with a kind of, like a bravado, actually, not so much bragging, but bravado. I did this and I was there. And I thought, that's fascinating. So a lot of the book is from CIA materials. But a lot of it is informed by people saying, you should go and look there. You haven't read that. You don't know about this. The stuff about the use of trade unions, the AFL-CIO in Guyana, I would never have known to look for that. I would never have in my life thought that the AFL-CIO had an office, 2 offices on the East Coast of the US, where they brought trade unionists, particularly from Latin America, and trained them, sent them back, and used them to, when they needed to have mass protests to create problems. So Chedi Jagan's government was basically dogged by these CIA trained and paid leaders of trade unions who brought people on the streets, not for the interests of the people on the street, but for the coup. And that was the mass support for the coup. It's incredible, you know. In fact, a British intelligence guy said it shouldn't be called the AFL-CIO, it should be called the AFL-CIA. And I thought that's as the British are, that's rum, you know.
Yeah.
The dry joke.
Yeah.
Very British.
Right. Well, yeah, oh man, there's so much to ask. I do want to quickly get, you mentioned Oliver Stone, and I'm very curious what you think, because you talk a little bit about Kennedy in the book, and there's kind of two main sort of positions that I feel like a lot of leftists have on JFK, and one is that, hey, and this is what I used to think, like, he's a liberal nationalist, he's an imperialist, like, you know, who cares? They had no reason to assassinate him. And then the other side, which is like, oh, he was this closet socialist who's on the verge of, you know, making America into a Marxist revolutionary country. And would you agree that the truth might be somewhere in the middle there? Is that, like, there are signs he wanted to ramp down the Cold War, or at least that it wasn't in our strategic interest, and the CIA didn't like that so much? And in short, who do you think killed Kennedy?
Who killed JFK? Boy,
Yeah.
that's so. Shall I open the envelope and reveal it finally?
Well, you have the CIA. Yeah, you have their info.
Look, the fact is that the United States is filled with a lot of nutcases with guns, and they've done a lot of killing over the years, and so everything doesn't have to be the CIA. Let's just face that, you know. Okay, in the early 20th century, late 19th century, the anarchists did kill people. McKinley was killed by an anarchist and so on. Right. You know, Lincoln, I think that's not a conspiracy. You know, I don't know what people think about what the current thinking is on Lincoln, but a lot of the
I think it was the CIA. They didn't exist yet, but
that's
I think,
right.
Yeah.
With time-traveling CIA agent did it. I think there's a lot of there just is a lot of uncertainty because there's a lot of killing. You know, was Malcolm X killed by the government? Wow, interesting. Was MLK, Martin Luther King, killed by the government? I think so. I actually think that's pretty open and shut. There was a good book about that a few years ago. I think some government people were involved in the killing of Martin Luther King. That I'm almost sure about that. King was a threat, a genuine, serious threat. He had pivoted far enough to the left. He had started the poor people's movement, and they got rid of him. I don't think that was an accidental killing. Not one crazy white guy with a pop gun shooting him. You know, that seemed a little too convenient to get him out of the way. Was Kennedy a real threat? Now, there are two things even there. One is, was he a real threat, or was he perceived by some people as a threat? I personally don't think Kennedy was a threat to the order. I think he actually took orders very well. Bay of Pigs is a great example of that. Any book you read on the Bay of Pigs, Kennedy really was not a dissenting voice. He went along with the Dulles brothers. I know it was not his plan. He inherited it, but he didn't say, you know, anything. He was happy to go along with it. So I actually don't think Kennedy was a threat to the prevailing order, to the, you know, United Fruit Company, because the Dulles brothers were shareholders in United Fruit. I mean, the coup in Guatemala was a coup that profited the Dulles brothers. It wasn't just for the United States. It was for their personal profit as well. Something that doesn't get talked about enough. And even the secretary of one of the Dulles brothers had shares in United Fruit. That's the extent of the corruption, you know. But he might have been perceived as a threat. And he certainly could have been perceived as a threat by the mafia. And so, you know, is it the mafia? Is it rogue elements in the CIA? See, I know enough about the CIA to know that there are lots of rogue characters that, you know, dance in and out of that agency. It's not necessary that the director signs a note and says, go do it. There's a lot of, you know, winking, nodding. There's a lot of kind of ambitions of being greater than you actually are. You know, you give somebody a badge, you give them training to use a high-powered gun. You don't know what they're going to do, you know. So I just think that the level of uncertainty here, it's worthwhile maintaining. I just don't want to actually accept that Kennedy was a real threat. I don't think that's the case. Evidence doesn't suggest it. But they could have perceived him as a threat. And therefore, it may be absolutely true that he was taken out. But I mean, you know, it's still the case that the documentation is not public. And so I think that's what Oliver Stone is really pointing at, is that give us some more. It's hard to believe that this was a lone wolf guy sitting up there with a high-powered gun. It's hard to believe that.
Right. Well, if anyone wants to find out more about how the CIA pulls off these coups, there's like a 9-step guide you lay out in the book. Hopefully that doesn't get into the wrong hands, by the way. I'm sort of worried that young prospective CIA people will see that and be like, oh, that's what I do.
Tips.
But it's worth the risk to read Washington Bullets. But as for closing here, you are I believe, the founder of the Tri-Continental Institute. What can you tell us about the work you do there, and how can people get involved?
Well, it's called thetricontinental.org on the web, which is the only address that counts.
Okay.
We are part of an international project called the International People's Assembly, which is a network of 200 political organizations around the world, including Landless Workers Movement in Brazil, the Socialist Party of Zambia, Workers' Party of Tunisia, the Communist Party of Nepal, and so on. Big, hefty political organizations have come together, and we are essentially the research institute of the assembly. And we do tons of work. We have offices all over the world. We do a lot of work. We're committed to building a different kind of understanding of the world. I was telling you earlier today that I went onto Facebook and I said, when I started off in academics, people just used to say to me, you're such a clown. They say this all the time. And I used to, honestly, although now meeting you, Anders, and saying that you're a clown, trained clown, but I used to take that in a negative way because I felt they were dismissing me. And I used to feel bad about that. Then I realized it took me some time to realize what they're saying is, don't believe too much or don't speak so bluntly. You should be more sophisticated. Don't believe if you believe too much, you'll maybe get sort of sidetracked. Now I believe that the earth is in such a perilous state, the planet, the people. We gotta just speak our minds. We can't be offensive, but we have to speak our minds. We have to be clear. And so one of the things in Tri-Continental is you will not see us pulling our punches. We say what we feel and we write so that people can read our work. We don't hide behind abstractions and we don't hide behind complicated language. We want complexity to be legible. It's the hardest thing to do. It's easy to make, simple things complicated. It's much harder to make complicated things simple. And that's the task we've set ourselves. How do we make a very complicated reality as simple as possible, as clear as possible? Because we want to reach you. We don't want to just talk to intellectuals, or we don't want to talk to the elites. We want to reach you. And we want you to tell us whether we are legible or just full of shit.
Well, amen to that. Thank you again so much for coming on, Vijay Prashad.
It's a pleasure. It's great.
And that was Vijay Prashad, everybody.
Wow, yes. Check him out on Twitter at Vijay Prashad, Vijay Prashad.
Is telling the truth based? Right in.
I don't know if we mentioned this on air, but he is in Chile right now when we're talking to him, and he said he began his day in India and then is going somewhere else.
I think he said he was going to end it in Malaysia. And then I was like, damn, that's already 2 countries. And he's like, and I'm in Chile. And I was like, I need to see the timeline of where you're going. Because it does not track for me with the amount of, how are you doing our interview right now?
Well,
yeah, what the fuck?
There's a possibility, and I don't know if possibility is the right word, but there's a chance he has the power of flight.
Oh.
Okay.
It's the first thing they teach you at mime school. That's why you gotta shut your mouth. Keep that shit to yourself.
I like it.
Join the Tri-Continental and they will teach you how to fly.
I'm going to school to uncover the secret power of mimes.
Flying mimes. That would be a good superhero, a flying mime.
No, it wouldn't.
I know it wouldn't.
Maybe not. Okay, a villain. It would be a better villain.
Very scary villain, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's silent. It's coming right at you.
That's right.
Or away from you hauntingly.
Mm.
And you know how they could do things like they pull that rope or whatever? They just, I don't know, they like flapped their wings and they're like flying like with their arms.
Aren't you the one who said that we shouldn't get into jokes?
I'm hungover. Okay, yes. What do we want to plug on the way out here?
I was holding back. I want to plug that JFK was actually killed by Papa Doc Duvalier with voodoo and the number 22. Didn't say that to his face because I didn't want to insult our guest, but as we all know, loyal listeners of the show, JFK was killed by voodoo.
Right, because Papa Doc had that doll. And why would he have that if he didn't do it?
It was on the 22nd of, was it September? Come on.
9/22/63. Is that no 11/22/63? Stephen King book.
No.
November
22nd. The point being, 22nd, 2/2. Papa Doc was obsessed with 22. He killed JFK.
Tell me God didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
Was that
Are we doing plugs?
Yes.
That's our movie of the week? Is an idea I had.
All right. I am. I have to think of the movie of the week. That's right. Come back to me.
Okay, we're going to come back to Anders. My movie of the week is JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, Season 6, on Netflix, streaming now, which is about women and women empowerment, which as an ally, I support. And that's also my plug.
Yo, real talk, I watched this movie Possession last night. It's like an old horror film. It's got Sam Neill in it. It was banned when it came out in the UK. It takes place in Berlin in like 1981 before the wall fell.
Real shit.
It's fucking tight. That movie kicked ass. It was about a divorce. It was also about H.P. Lovecraft tentacle aliens.
Oh my God, dude.
And everybody acted their ass off in it. I was having mental breakdowns. That's my movie of the week, Possession. My plugs are listen to this podcast and sign up for our Patreon. Listen to my other podcast, Why You Mad? And that's it.
We did a very extensive episode on Max Headroom this week, which is a guy I had never heard of before this show.
That's right. Yeah. Check that out. I'm at Andersley here on Twitter, Dursley on Instagram. Check out Redacted Tonight, my OJOB. And movie of the week, maybe we'll do an episode about this. It's 40th anniversary of the film Reds with Warren Beatty. And, oh, wow. Speaking of being a ally to women, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of his co-star. How could I be so
I guess you're not
sexist?
An ally to women.
I'm not an ally to women. No, Diane, of course it's Diane Keaton. That's what I thought. It's kind of
like you're an enemy to all women.
That's, yeah. She was on the tip of my tongue, but I wasn't sure it was her, and I didn't want to, But anyway, check out Reds.
Yep. And doubling down on this Patreon plug, you got to get back there to uncover hit characters like Barack Onanism.
Barack Onanism, the mashup character of Barack Obama and the biblical concept of forbidden masturbation.
Which I've been working on in my free time, and I've come up with this. Allow me to be clear. I shoot that glue.
Allow me to be milky and not clear. Talk about cum, folks.
Allow me to shoot my goop.
If you like my seed, you can't keep it. On the ground.
I'm days later having a lot of fun with this. Okay.
Oh, man.
Thank you again to our guest, who was a very smart guy, for coming on. All right.
Yeah.
And we'll see you at the movies.
That is not how we end this show.